videotapes are a powerful adjunct or a powerful tool in achieving these targets. A great deal of involvement, because you can see what you have been doing, you can. So, when we talk about being modeled, modeled in the term, you are not hindering the creativity, you are giving the teacher his or her own space, but at the same time you are modeling, so that the teacher and the student participation, the levels at which they are able to connect to the students, they are all retained. And then there has to be a greater sophistication on the part of the supervisor. A large sophistication is needed on the part of the supervisor, and thus it is up to the supervisor, up to the teacher, how you can help the student use these videotapes as a powerful tool. Videotapes definitely are a powerful tools, but then a lot depends on how they are being delivered. So, we have talked about a lot about micro teaching, and then what are the various special features, how it can be done, what are the various interrelated mechanism, and along with the use of techniques that is being evolved day by day. What is very important, that we need to focus on the teacher, on the student's background, we need to connect with the student's background, and there has to be a link between the student, the school and the community. Student, the teacher, student of a college or a university, and his or her community, the social background. Now, what happens is, and then for this there are various powerful tools in the form of videotapes, in the form of IT sector, in the form of social media, which can help you attain all these targets. It is a powerful mechanism, but then still lot of things need to be done. Now, but there are certain major concerns which I need to bring to your notice. It is a powerful mechanism, I agree, but then those interested in training of teachers of English have to look at all this. First is the area of teaching of English, and you have to identify the performance criteria and the technical skills. But there are certain questions in concern. First is whether micro teaching is appropriate for a program of English education, because it is an outgrowth of behavioristic psychology, and the goals of micro teaching are set by those who administer the program. So, then what happens? When the goals of micro teaching are set by those who administer the program, it becomes like a programmed teaching machine. Three things are taking simultaneously. The goals of the micro teaching are set by those who are administering the program. These goals are then analyzed, and in terms, they are analyzed in their components, and then a certain pattern is devised that leads the teacher trainee to perform in the desired way. At some minimal level, you are kind of setting a framework, you are kind of giving them a model that you have to behave in a desired manner. So, what happens is, do we actually, because this is a behavioristic psychology, are we giving them patterns of behavior, or do we target at giving them patterns of behavior? Thus, what happens is, the main technique of supervision in micro teaching process is to reinforce behavior, selectively reward certain behavior which approximate the skills, but at the same time we are trying to teach and to criticize those behaviors which do not lead the trainee to behave in the way we think he should. Okay? So, we do not want that we do not want to set guidelines in a way that we want them to do certain thing in such a manner. So, now the question in concern is, are we preparing a programmed teaching machine? Do we intend, or is this our purpose, to prepare a programmed teaching machine? Which means, are we preparing the English educators who base their lessons on micro teaching programs in a psychology whose goal is prediction, control, and then deliver? So, are we kind of trying to control the human behavior? As educators, we do not we are never interested in the freedom of human beings. We want them independent, we want them to be creative. So, do we accept this behaviorism as the psychological base of microteaching? Are we not involved in a program which trains rather than educate? See, we do not want them to, in the entire process, are we educating them or are we training them? We need a program which educate, but we do not want to train them. We want that the scope of presentation or the scope to develop the creativity, we want to leave it to the student. So, are we not involved in a program which trains rather than educate? So, if our goal is to be involved in training the teachers, how does such training relate to their education? Is our goal related to training the teacher or are we trying to train them? We need a program. I would rather say we need a program which educate rather than train. And there are a number of reasons why it reflects this involvement, especially for the training of the English learner. Can we train our teachers in certain aspects of teaching that are considered important? So, what I personally want is, like, we do not want a psychological base, or we do not want to curb the freedom. Rather, we need to develop a program which would help educate them instead of training them. For example, can we train them to empathize with the students? How do we train them? We want to train them, we need to train them to empathize with their students. At the same time, we also need to train them to be enthusiastic about their work. So, if the teacher is enthusiastic, we need them to train to be enthusiastic human beings, and then human beings enthusiastic teachers. One very important aspect is we need to train them to commit themselves to continue learning, because learning is a continuously evolving process. So, we want them to empathize with their students, we want them to be enthusiastic about their work, and we also want them to respect the opinion of the students, and simultaneously we need them to commit themselves to continue learning. So, these are very, very important features which we want our students to do. I feel that with the things that we teach or train our students through microteaching, they are really inconsequential, because we know that the skills defined are necessary. All these skills are defined are necessary, but certainly not sufficient for good teaching. So, would you not agree that there is a relationship? There is a relationship between the type of people we are and the type of teachers we are, the type of human being I am and the type of teacher I am, because the type of human being is definitely reflected in your personality, which means the type of human being you are is reflected in the type of teacher you are. So, between the types of living we do and the type of teaching we do, there is a relationship, and this relationship is inseparable. You cannot separate this relationship. So, there is a relationship between the type of living, between the type of human being and the type of teaching that you do. Any attempt to train teacher proposes to train human beings to be a type of person. So, what do we want them? Microteaching presupposes the idea that the teacher's role is to control the student and to direct the class. Microteaching assume that the teacher's trainee, when the trainer, not the trainee, the trainer, that our role is to control the training of the teacher, and the skill of microteaching also reflect the same idea or the same assumptions. So, if we train our interns mechanically, how will they train their students? Thus, if we believe in this concept of microteaching, I would rather say that teacher is more of a facilitator, or a teacher is more of a model who facilitate learning by acting as a resource for his or her students, but it becomes a little difficult to try and fit the students into a set frame of microteaching. Therefore, I would again emphasize that the focus of my concern is on the psychological base of microteaching. and its mechanistic use as a technical or a training procedure. I do believe that micro-teaching could be used not just for training the teachers of English language, but for educating them as well. For this, we have to forget the percepts of behaviorism and think in terms of education rather in terms of training. Education as opposed to training presumes an interest in presenting and sharing with students the experiences which will lead to self insight and insight into the relationship between the type of human beings they are and the type of teachers they will be. So, in this process of educating them, we would be interested in presenting them with experiences which encourage them to develop confidence in what they are and what they want to be. So, we have to kind of inculcate or help them develop this confidence of what the type of human being they are and the type of human being they want to be. So, very basic to education is a faith in the nature of the our interns or our learner, that they will achieve the best that they want to be. So, because this training says, on one hand what this training seems to be saying is, we will shape you to be what we want you to be. Now, this is not our concern. We do not have much confidence in you. This is not what we want to train our students to be. What we want them is that this training looks to standardization rather than diversity, constraints and requirements rather than options and freedom. So, my concern is very, very clear. Micro teaching is definitely a potentially powerful resource in the field of education, especially the language of English. But the confrontation is, what we do is, with a smaller number of students for a shorter period of time, using the models of television, and then there is the focus supervision, which would definitely be of immense value if they are used as resources for our prospective teachers, but then they should not be used as a process they are forced to go through. And the initiative to use these resources should come more from the student rather than the facilitator. So, there has to be a supervisory conference which would be more beneficial to the trainee when it is the result of his own inner feeling for the need of it rather than that of the something being provided by the supervisor under any kind of compulsions. So, what we need to think is whether we are using this technique to mold and shape the future, or say our future teachers, or whether we are kind of using it, we can devise ways of using it in a more consistent way, which could aim at as an educational experience. Yes, as long as you are using this technique to devise ways in developing more consistent teachers, fine. So, therefore, from time to time, what is important is, we need to gain the students' attention, we need to establish expectations of the student, then reviewing the content, relevance of the content, presenting the new information, linking it to the previous knowledge, providing a learning guidance, providing practice, providing feedback, providing for practice to enhance what they have retained, and then engage the students in solving the problems. So, these are the various techniques what we are trying to evolve, but we do not want to produce or mold and shape the future teachers, rather we want them to develop as consistent, fulfilling the aims or going through educational experience. We do not target to develop them as machines. We do not want computerized machines. We want them to be individuals who have with their who breathe, who smile, who learn, who relate. And therefore, here comes the very important aspect, because teacher is more of a facilitator. So, we want the personal involvement of the teacher, we just do not want mechanized machines. So, the teacher, living, breathing, alive, sensitive teacher can never be replaced by machines. So, this is very particularly very important when it comes to evolving methodologies or techniques or mechanism or what you call the teachings. You have to pay much importance to while developing syllabuses and pedagogies. So, while developing pedagogies, you need to pay more and more importance, more and more emphasis on the involvement of the teacher and the participation of the student. So, it has to be a mutual process rather than a one-way process. Thank you.